Hi guys, welcome to chapter 13. We're finally going to start learning about the human body, and I'm so excited. So let's talk about humans. Humans are animals. We are part of the kingdom Animalia. We're similar to every animal you can think of, but it gets more specific than that. So we are vertebrates. We do have an internal skeleton and a backbone, an endoskeleton. We are endotherms. We can control our own internal temperature. And we are mammals, okay? So that's as specific as that classification gets. But we are the only animal that was created in God's image. And the Bible tells us that we were fearfully and wonderfully made. So, in this chapter, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is the parts. It's the names of the parts and the study of the parts and just the naming of things. Physiology is then the function of that. So we're going to talk about all these different organ systems. You're going to need to name all the organs, but you're also going to need to talk about what that system does. What does that do for our body? Okay. Our bodies are organized in a very specific fashion. Okay. We've talked about cells before. The cells are like the base level organization. Okay. They're the Legos that build us, the basic building blocks of our bodies. But they can be specialized. There are very unique cells that do very specific things. Okay. But then we get a little more specialized. Okay. And those cells can come together and form a tissue that has a common function. So similar cells will band together and create a tissue. So like muscle cells will collect in as muscle tissue. Here we go. So we've got muscle cells, and then we've got a whole bunch of muscle tissue together, and it works on a common function. Okay. Well, then you could get some different tissues working together and actually act as an organ, okay? So for this example, we've got a heart, but you can think of different organs. We've got kidneys, we've got stomach, we've got liver, all these different organs, and they're made up of different tissues, which are made up of different specialized cells, okay? And then finally, what we're really going to be talking a lot about is these organ systems, okay? And you might have more than one organ in the system, and an organ might actually appear in more than one system, but they have a basic function that they work on. Okay, so for this example, the system would be the circulatory system. The organ would be the heart. The specific tissue would be muscle tissue, and the cells would be muscle cells. Okay, that's kind of how we organize. As we go down this list, we're getting more specific. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the tissues a little bit. Let me move myself just a little bit lower. There we go. We've got four basic types of tissue. We've got nerve tissue, which is made of nerve cells. And you can see that in this picture right here. Those cells, that tissue that works together, works to send and receive nerve impulses. Okay. We've got muscle tissue. Our muscles are made up of muscle tissue. They contract to help us move or to help move substances through our body. We will talk about these three different types of muscle tissue in the next section. Okay. Then there is connective tissue. Basically, anything that kind of bridges a gap between other types of tissue is considered a connective tissue. Blood, fat, bone, those are all connective tissues. But then you've got the tissue that literally connects things to another. So tendons connect muscles to bone. Tendon is a connective tissue. Ligaments connect bone to bone. That's a connective tissue. Cartilage is also a connective tissue we'll talk about. And then finally, we've got epithelial tissue. All of the surfaces of our body are lined with epithelial tissue. So the internal and the external structures. Our skin is epithelial tissue. The lining of our blood vessels, the lining of our digestive system, all the linings of things, the linings of your cheek, that's all covered with epithelial tissue, which is made up of epithelial cells. Okay. All right, so in the course of the remainder of the year, we're going to talk about all of these systems, okay? We've got the urinary and the circulatory system down there. I'm going to list all of these for you. So digestive, that's our eating, getting our energy. Our muscular helps us to move, our muscles. Integumentary, that's a fancy word for skin. We're going to actually talk about that today. Lymphatic, very closely related to our circulatory system, but it's also related to our immune system. It's a different type of circulatory system. The endocrine system is all of our hormones, which then actually control all these other systems, okay? Our nervous system, that's our brain and taking our senses in and responding to that. Skeletal, that's what gives us structure. And we're going to talk about the skeletal system and the muscular system this chapter. They're useless without each other. They're separate systems, but you need both of them to really be able to have a body and move, okay? Reproductive system, yes, we are going to be talking about that. This breaks down the male and the female separately, but they're both considered the reproductive system. The respiratory system, that's taking oxygen into our bodies and releasing carbon dioxide. Excretory system, which this little picture talked about as the urinary system, that's your kidneys and removing waste through urine. And then finally, our circulatory system, that's the heart and the bloodstream, okay? We're going to learn about all of those in detail, okay? So let's start with the integumentary system. That is our skin, our hair, and our nails. Your skin is considered an organ, and it's actually considered the biggest organ of our bodies, okay? Keratin is a special protein that kind of works with dead skin cells. Our hair and our fingernails are made out of keratin, okay? We don't feel anything with those, fortunately. You can cut your nails, you can cut your hair without feeling that. But those are produced from dead skin cells and keratin, okay? So let's talk about these layers of our skin. So our epidermis is this outer layer, and it's a thinner layer, and it's mostly dead skin cells. This little layer out here, most of that is dead skin cells, okay? It contains epithelial cells and not much else, okay? There's no nerves in the epidermis. This is why you can take like a needle, like if you ever have a splinter, you can kind of pick at it with a needle. You can even take a safety pin and kind of stick it through the outer layer of your skin and like hang it there, and it looks all weird, but it doesn't hurt because there's no nerves in the outer layer of skin. But then we get down to this thicker layer that's between the epidermis and this subdermal fat layer, okay? So the dermis is where all the interesting stuff is, okay? It's much thicker. It contains blood vessels. If you cut yourself and it bleeds, that means you've gone down to the dermis. We've got capillaries in there, even a little paper cut. It hurts, and so you know you're in the dermis. If it bleeds, those little blood vessels have been ruptured, okay? There are nerves down there. That's why it hurts, okay? You can see little nerves. But there's also glands that secrete things like sweat and oil. That's why your skin gets oily, our hair gets oily. And hair follicles, okay? So let me move myself over here. You can see this hair follicle down here. Okay, that's like the root of the hair. When people shave, what they do is they just take this hair right off the surface here. But then there's all this stuff down below, and so it grows out right away. If you pluck a hair or wax and it pulls the whole thing out, you're removing this entire piece of hair. This follicle will still grow, but now it has to grow. Let me change colors here so you can see this. Now it has to start growing down here, and it has to grow all this distance before it pops out of the epidermis. And so this is why people wax and pluck to make it last longer instead of just shaving, okay? Our skin has pores in them, and you can see one kind of right there. These are just little tiny holes that allow that oil and that sweat to come out of. When you sweat, that sweat is coming out from a sweat gland up to the surface of the skin, okay? Same with the oil. There are pores next to your hair and on your face and on your body to secrete some oil to keep the skin nice and moist, okay? So what's the big deal? Why is skin such an important thing? Well, that's what brings in a lot of our senses, okay? Those nerves tell us if something hurts. They tell us if something's hot, if something's cold. You can just sense that you're touching something. You can recognize what you're touching. Pressure, when you sit down, the nerves in your legs can tell that you're sitting on something. And pain. Pain is actually an important thing. Without pain, you might actually damage your skin without knowing that it's being damaged. Pain is what tells us to remove ourselves from a situation so that it doesn't keep hurting us, okay? Temperature regulation is a big part of our skin. The sweat glands release that moisture, which evaporates off and takes heat with us. When you get cold, your skin turns into little goosebumps, and those little tiny muscles in there actually release heat. They release energy and help warm us up. But our blood vessels in the skin also change. When it's really cold, they constrict. When it's really warm, they dilate and allows that heat to escape from those dilated. That's why people get red when they get really warm, because the blood vessels near the surface of the skin are actually dilating and there's more blood there. Your blood's warm, it's taking your body temperature, and as it comes close to the surface, that heat can then escape from our bodies, okay? Protection. This is probably the biggest function of skin. Your number one defense against infection is your skin, but it also prevents water loss and heat loss. Burn victims that lose a large portion of their skin, their two biggest risk factors are infection and dehydration, because the moisture just escapes. We will talk more about this when we get to the immune system, okay? But this is why when you cut yourself, when you cut the skin, you need to make sure and keep it clean, because now you have an opening that those germs can get into. If you get germs on your hands and there's no cuts, you cannot get sick from that. It's only when you touch your eyes, pick your nose, chew on your fingers, or touch somebody else that you transfer those germs to them. The germs on your hands cannot make you sick. They cannot get through your skin. That's why we wash our hands, okay? Our skin also allows us to produce vitamin D. When you go out into the sun, there's a chemical reaction and it gives us vitamin D, which also helps our immune system. And then let's talk skin color, okay? Obviously, people are different. We see this all the time. Melanin is the name of the pigment that gives us those different shades, okay? Everyone's skin is the same. People have different amounts of melanin in them. So our genes determine how much melanin somebody has. And this is why racial differences, are perpetuated, because the genetic information is passed down into the offspring. Unless you have different races that are actually reproducing and producing offspring, the genetic instructions stay pretty similar, okay? So a lot of melanin means darker skin. Very little melanin means very pale, light skin, okay? When you go out into the sun, your skin that melanin gets stimulated and it produces additional melanin. This is why we get a tan when we go out into the sun. Part of the purpose of melanin is to protect us from the sun. So the darker your skin, the less sensitive you are to the sun, the less likely you are to get sunburn. Doesn't mean you can't, okay? Even very dark-skinned people can get a sunburn. But that melanin helps absorb the sun. So the more melanin there is, the easier it is to absorb that sun. If you've ever seen an albino, that's a person that has no melanin in their system. And it is a genetic disorder, and they are incredibly pale, almost translucent looking. Their eyes might even be reddish looking. Their hair is very light. Our hair color and our eye color is also determined by melanin. Okay, so those albino people don't have any melanin at all. The less melanin you have, the more careful you have to be in the sun. Okay. So how do we keep our skin healthy? That is a big no-no right there. Okay, you've got to use sunscreen. The UV rays can cause skin cancer. They can cause problems. They can cause burns that blister and all that stuff. So sunscreen is very important. Okay. And then keeping it clean. You've got to shower. You've got to wash your face. Don't touch your face, things like that. Keep it clean, okay? There's waste from our bodies that's coming out of our pores. Plus, there's all those germs that are getting onto our skin. We need to wash those off, okay? Don't touch too much. Keep your hands off your face. Okay. Drink water. Keep your body nice and hydrated so your skin doesn't dry out. Acne is when you get an infection in one of those pores. So you're touching too much, you get bacteria in there, and it actually becomes infected a little bit. Washing your face, cleaning your hands, not touching your skin all helps with acne. Okay. Whew. One system down, many to go. All right. Bye-bye.